Welcome to SarderTV. I'm Vaishali Jain. We have the pleasure of having Andrea Elkin with us today. Andrea was the Chief Learning Officer at BNY Mellon, and she was also a learning leader at firms like UBS Wealth Management and Prudential Financial. She's here to tell us more about what's next for her, about some of her experiences, and what she thinks lies ahead for learning leaders in the industry. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Vaishali.
So you had a 5-year career at BNY Mellon as a learning leader and previously at firms like UBS Wealth Management and Prudential Financial. Earlier in your career, you also explored roles in finance and sales. So tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think one of the interesting things, funny, is I don't think there was such a thing as a learning leader or a CLO when I started in the business. And I actually think that if there were, I probably wouldn't have wanted to do that anyway. When I started, I had my, eyes on, running into Wall Street, making a big splash there. But what I would say is, when I think about my career, I'm really thankful for the way that I started, because the idea of really working with the business, understanding the business, driving the business is what actually led me to how learning and leadership is so important to the business. So I'll give you an example and then I'll kind of walk you through some of the different career steps that I've taken. But when I started in the business, I was a data analyst. I was a financial analyst. And we were bringing new data insights that had never been really available before. We were using data, providing reports to senior leadership to help them make decisions. And this was a huge, new venture for them. And a lot of people didn't understand these reports, didn't know how to use these reports. And I'll never forget a time when I'm talking to our market leader in Chicago, and he's looking at his business results in a whole new way. And he says to me, Andrea, I'm not performing as well as the New York market leader. Why? What can I do? And literally, I'm on a 60-minute conversation with an individual, helping them plan out a business strategy. And that was when it clicked. I went, wow, I should be doing more of this, helping these leaders plan out a business strategy. What we would call that today is coaching. We didn't use that terminology then. And so what was interesting is when the leaders of that particular company moved to a new company and they asked me to join them, I said, I'd love to join you, but I don't want to do data analytics anymore. And they're like, what? I said, I want to work with your market leaders. I want to help them, train them, develop them. And that's kind of how I got started in that learning field. Now, you mentioned sales. The reality is that while I did that role for about 4 or 5 years, for me to advance to the next level was really about getting the same experience that all these other leaders had had. And they did the jobs that were critical to driving growth for the business. And so I felt like, and I'll be honest, especially as a woman, that it was critically important to get that kind of experience. So I went out there and, I became a relationship manager for the company that I was working with. We call that a financial advisor. I had to build my own business. I worked with a team. And that became just such a huge catalyst for me to be able to walk the talk, not just in leadership development, but in helping sales professionals grow their business. And so I kind of took both of those things and I started a business all around that, which was how do you help sales organizations grow through learning and development? And I'm just so thrilled for the time that I spent really understanding how a business operates, what's really on the minds of leaders, because one of the things that you will kind of hear throughout this whole conversation, you'll hear me repeat it over again, is business people don't think about, oh, I need learning. They think about, I need people to be able to do the things that I need them to do to add the value to my company. And that's the way we have to think about, the services that we provide to a company.
So tell us what your key priorities were as a learning leader and as Chief Learning Officer of BNY Mellon.
I had the great benefit of having a wonderful predecessor in my role. In fact, he was taped by you all, Dave DiFilippo. David and the rest of the leadership team, we had a pretty structured way of looking at things. You know, it was all about strategy, it was all about structure, it was all about talent. And so one of the interesting things, though, for me was in Dave's departure and then when I got promoted, it's what I would call, it sort of jump-started something new. Despite all the great work that we had done up until then, Dave's leaving became what I would say a catalyst for change from the organization. They were really questioning the university that we had put together. Was it delivering the value that they were looking for? Did we really need all the infrastructure that we had? The company was going through a huge transformation and is going through a huge transformation. And so the question was, where was this university structure bringing value? So my number one priority was to reassess that. Okay, so my number one priority was about all the different academies that we were providing: leadership development, technology support, risk and compliance, professional development. What exactly were these academies delivering? What were the priorities? And reprioritizing that. So that was the first thing and the first priority. The second priority was to really try to uncover where was the quality of learning, you know, most needed. Where could we potentially make some changes in specific learning programs that we were delivering? And so we did wind up making some changes there. Things like consolidating our professional development offering, even consolidating our management development offering, which was, you know, quite premier in terms of its importance in our strategy. Reinvesting in a particular business that had not had access to the learning. So what that meant from a priority perspective is, okay, I kind of understood we needed to create more efficiencies, but how are we going to rechange the resources in the organization and attach them to these new priorities? And then the third priority really was about a 3-year and establishing a 3-year plan that aligned with the company's business strategy. So, you know, that was a lot to do in, quite frankly, a 6-month period as I was transitioning into the role. So those were the major priorities.
So how did your job change when you became CLO?
What I would say is, again, the job changed. We had been spending 2 years building this university, so building capability for the company, and done really an amazing job. Several awards were won, you know, in all different areas. The work that I was leading prior in leadership and management development was being recognized. The capabilities we were building in instructional design and simulation work was being recognized. We were in building mode. When I became CLO, we were in evaluation mode, which is, you know, okay, we tried lots of new things. We, you know, co-partnered to bring in a MOOC. It was like, should we keep doing that? Should we not keep doing that? So it really changed from building a lot of new things to evaluating which of those things were working. That ebb and flow is really important to keep in a learning organization because, I mean, we're all about bringing new capabilities. So we have to stay on that innovative front, okay? But at some point, somebody's going to ask you, is that delivering for us? So that's really how it changed for me.
What do you wish you had known more of before you became CLO?
So this is an interesting one because, as I said, I started my career as a business person, right? And I only spent 5 years, the 5 years at BNY Mellon, was the first time I've ever worked in HR. So I will tell you, my business skills sort of atrophied while I was in HR. So I don't know if that was me or if that's a little bit about, you know, the HR organization in general. But I would tell you, I really kind of wished I understood more how much we were spending on, you know, different initiatives, how much usage we were getting from some of our new platforms. I kind of wish I understood more about the data of our business than I had. So that's just like a technical thing. Personally, I wished I would have understood my personal strengths a little bit more and felt a little bit more like, okay, I'm going to lead with that strength. That's kind of a self-awareness piece. And I do wish that I would have known more of the senior leadership of the company sooner. So while I knew some people, the idea of running a global organization, of over 200 people that are servicing 50,000 people globally with a very broad and expansive leadership team for the company, you can't make decisions on your own. You have to really know a lot of the leaders in the company. You have to understand what is keeping them up at night. You have to understand what their growth strategy is or what their efficiency strategy is. I don't think you can ever be prepared enough for that. So more and more relationships in the company.
What are some of the biggest areas that Chief Learning Officers should be focusing on when it comes to leadership and talent?
Well, there's no question. I think you've got to be really conscious of the new technologies and capabilities that are out there. I read several different articles recently on the disruptors, that might disrupt HR, might disrupt learning, the new vendors that are out there and the new capabilities. Honestly, you almost can't put your arms around how much is already out there and you don't have to develop yourself. And I think that is so critical. It's having the right vendor partnerships, knowing and making sure that your teams are constantly on the look for things, because you can bring things to market so much more quickly, right? If you don't have to develop some of that infrastructure yourself. And so I think that's a big thing. I think the other thing, no doubt, that people need to be aware of is, and I think we already are, so maybe I say this and maybe it's even old school, which is the individuals that are coming into the workplace today are a little different than, the individuals that are leading companies. So the generational gap is different. That's really significant because you go to such lengths to bring the right talent into your company, and the effort and the time and the investment that's spent, you really want to both grow and retain that talent. And so I think that learning leaders have to be, or CLOs have to be, that much more in sync with I'll call it maybe the HR organizations overall, in how do we do this together. It's no longer, I think, the days of having, the learning group is on one system and payroll is on another system and the performance management system is on another system. The recruiting process, they're going to all be on singular systems together. And we're going to have to integrate the way we work because the systems are going to be integrated. So I think that's another really important thing, outside of knowing what's available that you don't have to build, integrating what we're doing across the entire life cycle of an employee. Those are the two things that come to mind.
Tell us about some of the changes that you made to the organization's learning and development program.
Oh, definitely. I mean, what I would say is, and I'll talk even about the work that we did in leadership and management development. When I was asked to, become the Dean of Leadership and Management Development, that was a really cool time. We were in the build mode, and we had the great opportunity to go out and really say, what is our strategy going to be around this? And to really look and see how the organization was tackling this at the current time. So what did we uncover? We uncovered 34 different ways of developing managers and leaders throughout the company. That was one thing. The majority of the programs were, while highly regarded, meaning they were well received, they lacked stickiness. They were 2 and 3 day programs that people would come to, high quality, engaging for individuals. Not that people didn't learn anything from them, but it was very difficult to kind of see what went into action. So that was another thing. And there was really no guiding principles for management development. So what we did, a major change, was we moved away from the 2 day classroom. We went into a mode of how can you learn more as a manager virtually, using instructor-led virtual classrooms, but really short. Let's keep the classroom to an hour. Let's learn one skill, okay? And then let's practice that skill. And after we've practiced that skill, let's reflect on it. And so we instituted a whole new learning model, what we called Learn, Do, Reflect. And what's really cool about that is the learning piece is probably the smallest piece. You came to a virtual classroom, you learned, let's say, how to give feedback. But then we asked you to go out and give somebody feedback, not in the classroom, on the job. Okay, so you went back, you were given a period of time to practice that skill, and then we even sent surveys out to individuals, and we would say, how did your manager do at giving you feedback, so that we could consolidate and give results back to this cohort group of managers, and then they would reflect on it. They would coach each other. Oh, well, this is what I struggled with when I gave feedback, or this was a scenario that I didn't know how to deal with. Or managers were even admitting, I didn't do it. I didn't give the feedback, and it would be a conversation about, well, why? Well, I was a little unsure. I knew there would be conflict, and so they got coaching through the process. So this process of learn, do, reflect was a huge sea change. And then I'd say the last thing that we did from that perspective, which was really cool, was we were at an interesting time in our company's talent management practices, where while leadership development was global, our talent management practices weren't. And so trying to decide who was it that should get access and should have the highest priority for a learning initiative, we made a change with and moved away for a period of time from focusing on what traditionally is the high potential programs to focusing on leaders in transition, meaning when you first became a manager, when you were promoted to middle management, when you were promoted to senior leadership. This created huge efficiencies. Because think about it, you didn't have to spend all the HR's time trying to uncover who should go to programs. We were able to uncover very quickly using HR data who needed programs, and that led to a huge sea change for the company, honestly. More leaders getting more access to learning, readily accessible, more practical, with lots of practice. So that's where we went.
So there's so many learning technologies available today. Talk about some of the ones that you've used.
What I would say is the three that I think are probably really important would be social learning. Okay, so, using kind of social platforms to drive learning. Simulations is a very big one. And MOOCs, I'd say. So those three, from the social learning platform, the company had introduced Jive, which was the first social collaboration platform that the company had, and we used that throughout all of our management development programs. So we had something that we called Manager Month, where we spent a month of learning using that social learning. Social learning was embedded in all of our management development programs so that people could come kind of and share ideas with each other, pose questions to each other, work as cohorts together, share leaders as teachers. That was a very big one. I'd say from a simulation perspective, we introduced what we called skill simulations, which was really cool. So that's not just about simulating like how a company runs. This was video-based simulation where we could track how you would deal with difficult scenarios like giving feedback or coaching or setting priorities. And what was really cool about that is that over the course of time, we could track the kinds of decisions managers were making in these simulations and understand gaps in our overall capabilities as an organization. So that was really cool. And then in the area of MOOCs, we partnered with Coursera to deliver one of the first co-sponsored MOOCs between a company and a university on a topic that was both important to the company, but also important to individuals that wanted to get into finance. So that was really cool. So those would be three. What I would say is there's a lot of things that we didn't get a chance to do yet that I think are so critically important, which is mobile learning. It's an absolute priority for any learning leader today.
So you mentioned mobile. Talk about some of the other learning technologies that you feel are going to be disruptors in the way learning is implemented in the industry.
Two things. First, which is the mobile platform. That's number one. Number two is learning is going to be more personalized to the individual. So many CLOs have spent a lot of their careers, what's the company strategy and how do I drive that, when employees want learning strategies for themselves. So that's a very different approach. So where I think the biggest disruptor is going to be is in adaptive learning. I think that is going to be not only, we're going to have more technologies, but it's really going to change the way we think about how we develop content, how we deliver content, how we measure the impact of what we're doing. So think about it this way, and what adaptive learning means and how that changes. When you can get to a place, right, where you as the learner only have to take that learning that is relevant for you, okay? Think about how much more quickly you can complete learning, okay? Or think about it like this, which would be, I'm a new hire, right? And if there was all this data available that said, well, I took a bunch of tests as a new hire, I got feedback from my manager, maybe I took an assessment or a competency-based assessment, and the data understood kind of what I was good at and where I wasn't, and all of a sudden I said, I have 10 minutes free. And it recommends this is how you should use your next 10 minutes of learning. That's huge for companies. And I think we're on the brink of that. There's more and more technology that's available. And so to me, that is our number one priority. I think the other key thing is the learning organizations not having to own the content either. So more user-generated content, users making videos of how they do things on the job, keeping them up to date, making that, part of an individual's responsibility to give back to the company, which is, this is what I'm good at, so I have to make a learning program about what I'm good at the company every year, I think is going to be really huge.
What types of learning methods work best and why?
I think less about method and more about relevance. So if what you are being asked to learn or what you want to do better at is relevant, the methodology all of a sudden becomes a lot less. So when you're a new hire, right, and you need to learn how to do the job that you need to learn, you'll be happy sitting through 3 hours of classroom, even if just because you can leave there being able to do what it is that you need to do. If you're a new manager, in a lot of new manager training, for example, we teach all the basics of new management, right? One of them is, let's say, interviewing, right? New managers have to interview new people, or how to onboard employees into your company. The problem is that if you're not going to be doing that for 2 years, it's not all that relevant, and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. The methodology could be perfect, the training could be perfect, everything could be right, it's just not relevant to you. So the methodology really has to be about curation, getting the right content to individuals at the right time that they need it in the right amount. Okay, so that to me is more important than any learning methodology. What I do believe, though, is things do need to be bite-sized, but they need to be layered. So another example, and this goes back 10 years, when we were doing learning and development at UBS for all the new client service associates that would onboard with their financial advisor. So let's say you were doing new accounts for your financial advisor for 5 years at one firm. Then you came to another firm and you had to do it using their systems, right? Opening up a new account is a very lengthy process, believe it or not. It could take, the first time you're learning how to do it, an hour to do that. But you're not even going to remember all those pieces. So what you have to do is you make it bite-sized, but then it's layered so that you can get back to what part of that process do I need a refresher on? And you don't have to go through the entire thing. It's like getting ready for, a fall day. It's not about wearing the perfect sweater. It's like you got to wear the t-shirt, and you have to wear the jacket over the t-shirt. Maybe you need a scarf. You can take it off. You can figure out. It's all about layering okay, in terms of bite-sized learning and being able to go back to it, getting a refresher on it. I think that's kind of a universal must. I think the other thing, we've got to figure out more ways of getting access to the experts that either know how to do something or mentorship. So if you look at all the data research on high potential programs, on leadership development programs, one of the things they love best from that programs is the mentorship aspect that they get from it, which is, and the other individuals that they get to meet. I think that's a really important methodology that's not built into all of our learning, which is how do you get access to the person that if you really don't know how to do it, they can help you. You know, and some of the other ones that I talked about in terms of learning method, people like games. People keep focused on it if the learning feels like a challenge in and of itself and makes you think. That will help things be stickier.
What would the Chief Learning Officer have to do to stay relevant in the future?
I think that staying relevant, it's really important that as a CLO, you have to understand the business that you're working in. You can't just be an expert of learning. You have to really understand and immerse yourself in the challenges that your business, that you're trying to support, is going through. You know, offline, you and I had a quick conversation about technology. You know, being a great coder, for example, is, you could be a great coder, but unless you understand what the challenge that your business is going through, you can't create the new technologies for them that will help them drive that business forward unless you understand that. So that to me is paramount. They need to obviously be cognizant of the learning technologies. And I'd say the third really important thing is about really being integrated in the talent management process. Learning is going to start before people join your company now. It's no longer going to be about the day that you start learning about your company. Learning is happening. Every employee kind of wants to get better at their personal craft, and that gets somehow measured in performance management. So when they get feedback from a manager, let's say, whether or not it's in a traditional performance management process or it's in a continuous feedback process, that person's going to want access to learning right then and there, which is, wow, I just got this feedback. I didn't realize that I didn't know that. I need to find that like now. So, and if I want to be promoted, that's like another thing, which is trying to drive the enhancement of my skill set for a future role. All of these pieces are all part of an integrated talent strategy. And so I think learning professionals need to be just as much a part of that as the talent management functions that they're part of.
Tell us how you define a learning organization.
Well, a learning organization is about an organization that wants to make progress. Okay? It's about, and an organization every day is evaluating kind of how they're doing and looking for new and interesting ways of driving that forward. Maybe not even interesting, new and effective ways of progressing forward. Nothing is stagnant. Nothing has to be the way that it was before. And that's difficult because, you know what? You know, we work hard on the projects. Every single person that's working in a company, right, comes into work every day and they look at what they're doing as, I don't know, something that they've created or something that they've accomplished. And to ask individuals to critically look at that every single day and think, could it be a little bit better? You know, could we do this a little bit differently? Can we progress this further? That's tough. That's why it's hard to be a learning organization. But to me, that's what it's about. It's just about progress and always being interested in making progress.
So how can you build a culture of learning, and what behaviors do you promote in order to build a learning organization?
Some of the behaviors you promote is teamwork, okay? Because as teams will help you and look at yourself, what you're doing, you know, the problem that you're approaching differently. So sometimes teams just in general will help you get out of the box. And so I think teamwork is absolutely essential. I think data analytics, like having a kind of a data-driven approach to things is really important, because that's going to tell you either what you're doing, if it's working, if it's not working, what parts of it is working. So it helps you to really understand your business. I'm in a mode of, you got to just make it happen sometimes. So I have a total bent towards execution. So you can come up with great ideas, but you've got to bring them and start making them work. So just make it happen kind of culture are, to me, ones that keep learning. You can change what you're doing when you're trying to get something done, but if you're always trying to perfect things before they happen, I don't think that necessarily drives learning. So teamwork, data-driven analytics, that make it happen attitude, those are kind of the three things that mean a lot to me in driving a learning culture.
What resources do you need to build a learning culture?
Learning professionals up until now, I wouldn't say have always been the greatest at data analysis, financial analysis, right? I would say that we need to bring more people like that into the fold, and we need to dedicate resources to that. Now, can that resource be dedicated from an entire HR or across an HR organization? Yes, but sometimes what happens is you only get a fraction of that for what it is that you're doing. So I think that dedicating resources to that is really important. Having individuals that can also consistently look at, because you talked about it, right, being really efficient. What do I need to build as internal capability, and what should I buy as external capability is also a really important thing, because what's great about external, it's easy to turn up the volume on it, turn down the volume on it. I don't think that you have to build all your capabilities internally. What you must build internally is to have a team of individuals that are great problem solvers. That performance consulting mindset doesn't have to be an organization, okay, but it has to be a mindset of individuals that can talk to the senior leaders that are out there, understand the challenges that they're having, be able to help them see the solution set. So let me share something that I have found have happened my entire career as a learning professional. Business person says, Andrea, we need a new management development program that does X, Y, and Z, or we need a new sales program on referrals. Leaders are always coming to us with their learning solutions, okay? And what do? We go out and we say, okay, we'll build you a management development program. We can't do that. We have to ask our leaders to say, well, what exactly is the problem? Why do you need better managers? What are you looking at? What data are you looking at that's telling you that? What will success look like at the end of this? Because maybe you don't need a learning program. Maybe you're not selecting the right managers. Maybe you're not providing the right management to your sales leaders, and that's really the issue. But they'll come to us with their solutions. A great performance consulting mindset helps those leaders say, well, let's look at this problem holistically and let's make sure we're providing an holistic solution. And then the next thing that is so absolutely important, let's measure the success of this together. Too often our business leaders want the learning organization to measure the success of learning, but no, the original problem was you're not generating enough referral business or you're not gaining new clientele. The business has access to that data, not the learning group. So we need to partner on that much more upfront.
Do you find that a skills gap exists when you're hiring talent, and specifically in technology-related roles?
You know what the funny thing is trying to find individuals to lead technology training was the biggest gap. More than anything. There's not a lot of people that are out there that are really, really great at that today. So they can come with the right kind of technical skills, but it really does go back to helping your technology, whether or not they're app developers, architects, quality management, project management, they need to understand the business that they're involved in. And so that is a big part of it. They need to understand how technology is being used in your organization, okay? When you finally get through that, you have incredibly valuable insights, like for your organization. So you got to work really hard to retain them and to retain that talent. And that's all about then helping to hear from them. What do they want to learn more about? What certifications do they want to acquire in technology? What next rung up the ladder are they interested in? Do they want to become broader technologists? Do they want to move into management? That is really important in retaining that talent.
So how can our education system be improved to address the skills gap problem?
What I would say is, today probably we need to do more work partnering with higher education. I think we have to do more and more work in the field of just because you've graduated from college doesn't mean that your technical, learning has ended. And I don't think we can provide that all in a corporate university kind of setting. It's about, individuals feeling like they can go back to the universities where they learn some of their basics and they can continue to build on that and layer it more and more and more. So I really think that's kind of a big future area for learning and development is the collaboration with higher education. Things like MOOCs they're just at the beginning of where that potential is going to be derived, I think. I'm almost scared to say this, but going back for your master's degree, I think that might be old school. I think it's going to be about, I get my master's degree by kind of funneling on different kind of, hey, I take a course on this, I take a course on that, I did something internally, and, now I should have an honorary master's degree in that area.
What do you think is the biggest institutional obstacle to women in leadership positions in the workplace?
The institutional things, there are some behaviors today that are what I would say embedded in the culture of a lot of the organizations that I've worked in. Thankfully, Vaishali, I'm no longer the only woman in the room, okay? But I will tell you, for most of my career, I was the only woman in the room. And that age-old, you come up with an idea and you represent that at the table and it gets completely ignored, and then somebody else brings up the exact same idea and all of a sudden it's interesting. And, trying to dissect and understand that, what I realize is women do need to continue to build sponsors and mentorship. I wished I had something new and different in this regard, but to have your voice be heard and your ideas be heard, a lot of that doesn't happen in formal conversations. A lot of that stuff is happening outside of those formal conversations. So you have to be involved in that. You've got to be involved with people that you work with, not in formal situations where, you can get ideas on the table before you're even in the meeting. So that, I think, is a big thing. And I think we're breaking some ground at that. The other thing, and this is maybe a mindset piece, and, I can't speak for all women, I can speak for myself, but this idea that it's all about the work. If I just work harder, if I just do my job better than anybody else, I'll get recognized for that and I'll find myself in a greater area of leadership in the company. It's just not all about that. People need to know who you are in order to want to entrust you with greater responsibilities in the organization. So if you spend all of your time working on the work and, again, not building relationships, and what I mean by building relationships is even just asking people, would you ever be willing to spend a little bit of time just to get to know my background more? Look at somebody like me. I'm going to go into my next role. How many of those individuals are going to know that I started my own company, that I was a financial advisor, I was a financial analyst, that I, worked on mergers and acquisitions. How are they going to know that if I never spend time talking about that in a more casual setting? So that to me is a really important institutional aspect. We need to find more ways for women to be able to talk about all the interesting, things that they've done in their careers and just be more known.
So tell us about your new role and what's next.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm joining an amazing organization, ADP, that just has a huge, long, and interesting history of, bringing great business solutions, providing efficiencies to organizations, and, now is going to be this amazing human capital management organization that helps businesses, run and drive their talent capabilities. The role that I'm taking on is to be the VP of Business Learning, and that's going to be all about, right, how do we help individuals that are joining the business or help the clients that we serve, right, actually be able to do the jobs that they need to be able to do. And you remember when I was talking about all those cool technologies that are out there, that's really ripe for that. So things like how do you get the right learning to the right people, the right time, the right bite-size amount is going to be that big challenge. And so I'm really excited about it. It's an amazing organization. They have taken a huge kind of in-depth look at their learning infrastructure to kind of come up with this organization that we're going to build together. So I'm really excited about it.
What was it like to be in transition, and what did you learn?
Being in transition, you could almost go like this, oh God, I'm in transition. Being in transition is the best thing for any leader that I can possibly imagine. You learn so much. You have time to learn. You have time to go out and investigate what's happening in the industry that you're doing, to kind of explore that which is interesting for you. You have to be on your toes because, you're now representing what you do to other organizations as, right, best in class. You gotta really be on your game. I learned so much. I met so many new people, learned a lot of their best practices of what they're doing. Entering the first time in my career not working in a financial services organization outside of when I was a consultant, I learned all about, how to use my mobile device in ways that you can't imagine it can even be used for. And I know it sounds crazy, but, the chief technology officer at BNY Mellon said this. He goes, you have better technology on your phone than you do, on the job sometimes. And so when you're constantly using that job technology, you get out of sync. So that to me is what's really exciting. And it's just been such a great time for me. And you know what? It wasn't so bad to take a little bit of a rest too. I feel energized again. I'm like really excited to hit some new challenges.
Well, this was great, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it was terrific. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time on SarderTV.